Hi everybody, welcome out to the Dice Tower. My name is Chris Yee.
And I'm Wendy Yee.
And today we're taking a look at this. This is the second expansion to Return to Dark Tower called the Covenant expansion. This is going to add some good stuff, add some negative stuff, the same kind of thing that the first one did. So Wendy's going to show you what comes in this box and we'll give you our thoughts.
This is the Covenant expansion to Return to the Dark Tower. We've got some cool items here that I'm going to show you, and then I'll show you a little bit more about the player powers. So let's talk first about these monument buildings over here. So what these are going to do is these are going to eventually replace some basic buildings. So at the beginning of the game, what you're going to do is you're going to put down, you're going to remove one of the basic buildings from each of the regions, and you're going to place down one of these markers. And then you're going to have a card associated with it. For example, this is the Ark of the Golden Sun. As you can see, that goes with this guy right here, I assume, holding it up. And at the beginning of the game, it's going to have some requirements on it. So this requirement says that at the end of your turn, you have to have 2+ foes on or adjacent to your space. And you have to do that 3 times throughout the game. That's what those little marks at the bottom are. Once you've done that, this card will flip over and the actual big building will come out onto that space right there. And then you'll gain this benefit from that point on. So it just creates different buildings, but you have to work up to it. So this one, for example, when you reinforce, you gain a gear, or you can spend 5 spirit to gain a virtue and the top 2 cards of the treasure deck. So these are kind of cool. They're a unique addition. All right, we also have treasure cards. We have new treasure cards. These can be either played only, you can play the game with only these, or you can mix them into the base game with this expansion. Honestly, I played it with only these and I liked that, being able to see all the new cards. We also have spells. There's a player that uses spells. Blessings are interesting. They give you a wild advantage, but you lose it after your next heroic action. So these are temporary blessings, but they are 1 wild advantage. There's also new corruption cards. We'll take a look at those. Your basic movement's reduced by 1. You lose a spirit when you cross a river. You must pay a spirit to take a reinforce action. So there's just a variety of these. Those always suck. I always hate getting those. There's also new black corruption skulls. These ones are permanent. You can never remove these. So as they come out, they fill up spaces and it just sucks that they stay out. There's also these wasteland tiles. So these will come out throughout the game. And what they're doing is they go into spaces, they turn the space into a wasteland, and then you have to completely stop your movement there. You also lose some of your player power advantages on these spaces. And so it makes it just harder to fight and harder to move in this game. But there's, of course, mitigating stuff to balance that out as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at player powers over here. Now remember, there's only 3 of these because your region also will give you some sort of bonus as in the regular game. But the Reverend Astromancer over here, he's the one that actually uses spells, and he can remove a skull on or adjacent to your space. He also, if you remove a skull with your banner action, you gain a blessing. So that's pretty cool. That's a way that he can get a blessing, like literally every round. At the start of each month, prepare spells equal to the month number. So he prepares these spells. These are like little one-time use. So place a protection token on your space. Boom, you put out a protection token. It can prevent it from becoming a wasteland if it gets called up on the app to do so. So there's just different spells that he can do, and he progressively gets more spells as you go. He also has invocations, which are basically just stronger spells. When you cast a spell, you gain a blessing. Here we go, even more blessings, right? And then once per turn, when you cast a spell, gain the top card of the treasure deck. So pretty cool stuff right there. The Restless Warden, this over here. Banner action, if your quarry token is not on a foe, that's this little bird up here. If your quarry token is not on a foe, place it on a foe. Otherwise, move your quarry up to 2 spaces. So you're actually bringing monsters to you. Remember how it's hard to move in this game? Well, you're going to bring everybody back to you. You get a wild advantage versus your quarry. You prevent up to 3 army losses per battle card when you battle with your quarry. You get wild advantages versus your quarry. So look, you can really get stronger against those quarries if you want. When you defeat your quarry, remove all the skulls on or adjacent to your space. Obviously not these black ones because they can't be removed. And then you may remove your quarry token to ignore your quarry during its strike events. You can literally be protected from it. The Undaunted Aegis. For each corruption you have, gain 3 army. You may spend 10 to remove one of your corruptions. You get to gain 1 spirit for each battle card you spend. that you spend no advantages on. You can have an additional corruption at the start of the game with 1 random correction. So there's just like extra stuff. It's like good but bad. This is one of those like super negative characters that creates positives out of the negatives. When you reinforce, spend 1 less spirit for each corruption you have once per turn. If another hero would gain a corruption, you may gain it instead and gain 2 spirit, and then a wild advantage for each corruption you have. So corruption is good and bad. Finally, we have the devious swindler. So you roll the haggle die and get to gain the results. And then when you battle, gain all advantages in the treasure market. And then when you roll the haggle die, you get to ignore the bad stuff. So you're rolling the haggle die all the time for your banner action, and you're just completely ignoring all the bad stuff. That's the reason why I never use the haggle die, is because you have the potential of not only getting nothing, but like worse. But this one completely ignores it. You can ignore the army and the spirit losses on critical hits and battle cards, which is pretty cool. After you roll the haggle die, you may re-roll once and take either result, and then when any player gains a treasure from the treasure market, you gain a blessing. So there's just some really cool stuff that happens in these games, like being able to have these treasure cards out and just gaining advantages based on what's in the treasure market. Super cool until someone takes all the advantages that you want and leaves you with stuff that's useless. There you go. Here's all the player powers. Let's go ahead and tell you what we think about it.
So this is not a modular expansion. If you're going to play with it, well, I guess the characters are the thing that you can kind of play with or without, right? But everything else is kind of like one package deal. If you want to play with the in the app, you actually have to select, like, yeah, I'm playing with the expansion. So if you want to play the big monuments, if you want to play with the wasteland tokens, if you want to do some of that extra stuff in there.
You know what, and even the player powers, like the spells, are specifically related around like wastelands and other stuff. So I think you really should just play with all of it.
Yeah, so in the app you select, hey, I'm including it, and then you're playing with this. And I think the rulebook even recommends don't mix this with the first expansion. Maybe certain little elements if you want to, like the permanent bad stuff skulls, but I think the app has to even tell you to drop those in.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so I wouldn't personally want to mix this with like the other expansion stuff because that already has its own motif going on in it.
And in fact, like even the treasure cards, I prefer playing it without the base cards mixed in because these ones are specific for this expansion. So they really help you with this expansion.
Yeah, and I think that might make it a little bit easier to have the treasures be just focused on like,
yeah,
I can get around wastelands without having to stop my movement there and stuff. So if you shuffle them together, it might be trickier. But if you're going to give me bad stuff in an expansion, I also want the good stuff that will help me creatively supersede those issues.
I think my absolute most favorite part of this expansion is the different player powers.
Having 4 new characters.
Yeah, and I feel like they're just so unique and different feeling from each other, as well as the ones that we see in other expansions and in the base game. And that's what I love, is I love being able to come and sit down and be like, okay, I am a spellcaster now. I'm just getting spells for free every round, you know what I mean? Like, I just get to, like, unlock stuff and prep them and decide which ones I want. It very much makes me feel like being, you know, like a druid in D&D where I'm prepping my spells every round. Like, I just love that.
That's a very good analog, right? Because I've never played a spellcaster in D&D. But every time I play with people who are, or I watch people who are, they're always sitting there going like,
what do I want? What do I need today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at that expense of having to do a little more planning and thinking comes the benefit of having magic spells that do awesome things. And that benefit not just you, but your co-players, the other players at the table. So I loved having you be the spellcaster. And be like,
would you like a blessing, Chris? Yes, you would.
Hey, remember that spell you can cast where I get this cool thing? Can I have that? I think my least favorite of the characters is the Undaunted Aegis, the one who is more powerful the more corruptions you have.
It's definitely a tricky one to play.
I think that some people will love it. I'm not the kind of player who minds having to hurt yourself to get something awesome, the dark magic tropes in these types of fantasy games. But this one, I feel like the corruptions are too debilitating for being able to like, oh yeah, I have like a few extra wild advantages. Yes.
They're also random. And I think that's the thing, is that they're very intense and they're random. So you're like, oh, wow, now I can't do this thing at all ever again until I remove this corruption. Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that's going to be when I accept it.
So I think that's the character I'm least likely to play, but the spellcaster, fantastic.
Super cool.
The hunter, the warden, who can use their token to kind of manipulate the monsters on the board, that's nice. That's a nice bit of control I don't think any other character has in the game.
Yeah, it makes me think of Thor's hammer in that dice game.
In Dice Throne?
Dice Throne, there you go.
Okay, yeah. Return!
Yeah, you're like, I dub thee as my foe.
And then what's the other one? The barter person, the haggle die person.
Okay, I was super jealous when you had that haggle die. You're just rolling that die every round. Nothing bad happens to you. You're just like, oh, I get a bunch of spirit. Oh, I get a bunch of this. Oh, I get like...
Right.
You made that exact noise and face and shoulder wiggle every round.
Oh, very pompous. I get to roll, yeah. And that's the thing is, the haggle die was one of the biggest weaknesses of the basic game.
Oh yeah, I never used it.
I never used it because the risk of not being able to do that barter at all for the possible benefit of like getting a few soldiers or maybe getting a potion.
Right.
Not worth it. But with a character who can completely ignore the bad thing, yes, let me use a feature from the base game incessantly. And there's also some treasure in here that paired with that where like at the end of every turn, go ahead and make a haggle die roll as well. So I'm rolling it like practically 2 times every turn without any fear of negativity.
Yeah, any negative. That's awesome.
Great.
And that's what I think is fun, is that it adds so much that you feel more powerful and you're like, ooh, I can just like, the blessings can stack. So as a spellcaster, you can get multiple blessings, you can give other people multiple blessings, like you benefit, they benefit, all this stuff. And you're like, I just feel stronger. This is awesome. So then the game kicks you a little bit more.
It is.
The wastelands are tough. Like,
and as Smash Mouth said, they start coming and they don't stop coming and they don't stop coming and they don't stop coming.
Yeah, they really do. Every round, you're just like, oh no, there's more. I can't. You're like beelining somewhere. You're like, I just got to get to this monster so I can fight it, or to this building so I can get more whatever you're trying to collect. And you just progressively watch the wastelands come in and surround you. And you're like, oh my goodness.
It feels pretty brutal to lose all of those terrain advantages, to have to stop movement because you entered wastelands. And it feels, I think at first it's going to feel more daunting than it actually is. But at the same time, it stinks. But the game gives you enough, I think, with the new characters, with the new treasures, to kind of be able to get better wild advantages to help compensate for the fact that, like, yeah, you have that special ability. Yeah, you're the king of the south or whatever. You have advantage in hills. All the hills are gone. They're wastelands now.
Yeah. Now, there are some treasure cards that let you hop around the board. And so if you end or you start your turn in a specific type of location, you can kind of go anywhere. And so that's fun. And I think that helps with the wasteland, bringing the monsters to the hunter, you know, being able to bring them and lure them into their region so they don't have to worry about walking so far. Like, I think that there's some really cool stuff that balances it out. So it's definitely more bad, more good.
Yes.
And so I think it adds some cool feels.
So yeah, the wastelands are going to be a thing that I don't think I want to play this all of the time. I will kind of bounce between basic game with this expansion, maybe with the first expansion instead, because the wastelands do change the game and they put more pressure on you than sometimes I kind of want, even though I can creatively get around it. So I think this expansion balances that very well.
We did not talk about the thing that most disappoints me. Does it most disappoint you?
Is it these? The super awesome
The miniatures
monuments?
are amazing looking.
Oh my gosh, yes. And you can even like fit all the skulls in here. Like the way that they sculpted these minis is super cool. They're very recognizable.
Yeah.
You can hold all the corruption and stuff in here. But they're a little too hard for me to construct.
I feel like they're way too hard for me to construct, especially for what you get.
Yeah, so when you look at these things here, so you have to, in order to get each one of the construction foundation tiles on here, defeat a foe in a wasteland.
But you do it 3 times.
And then take an action to actually build the cenotaph.
If you don't have the hunter, or you're not playing a game where there's a lot of foes that you're trying to focus on killing, and you don't have a lot of wasteland out yet because you want to get these, you want to start working on these early, otherwise what's the point?
Right.
It's just like, it's very random sometimes, and you have to be very specific. Like, I am working on this thing and doing this thing.
Yeah, and I, as you said, I don't know that the rewards on them are so great that they're worth completely going out of my way and focusing on constructing these rather than completing the monthly objectives, preventing the bad guy from leveling up, getting those companions that's going to help you in the end game.
Yeah.
Like, these have some pretty cool effects. I love the one that's like, get an attribute from outside of this game, from a character that you're not playing with. Like, I love that. And that's kind of the only one that really excites me.
This one, you can remove a foe for 20 armies anywhere on the board. That sounds cool, but I also had to end my turn with 4+ skulls on or adjacent to my space 3 times. Then I had to come here. Then I had to spend my reinforced action and 20 armies.
Right.
To remove a foe. You know what I mean? It feels like I had to do so much. I should just gone fight that thing.
And you don't start with whatever type of building this is, because you start with just a foundation, right? So you have fewer of the core buildings on the map at the start of the game. And so this is one of those where there's you start with a negative and you can get a benefit from it, but I don't feel that balance. I feel like you just kind of start at a detriment and it's going to be a little bit too hard to catch up.
Yeah, I think so.
But, I mean, what I would enjoy is if the app had a new scenario where you had to construct like 2 of these. And that was the thing that pulled the enemy out of the tower. That way these could be a focus rather than kind of feel more like a distraction from the actual focus of the game.
Yeah, because my issue with trying to do the monuments instead of the game focus is that the monuments aren't tailored towards fighting the big bad guy at the end.
Yes.
Whereas everything you get in a scenario is. And so I'd much rather go for the stuff that's like going to genuinely help me instead of maybe help me.
Right. The other thing we were talking about, the black skulls, the corruption, the super corruption. These are cool. They're jerks. They come out of the tower. They permanently stay in a building. You cannot wipe them with your heroic action. And I like that tension, right? Just a negative. There's not really any positive that comes with it, but I think that's clever.
It is funny, though, when you get multiple in a region and you're like, do I put them all in the same building so I can just avoid that building and I know I don't have to clear it out? Or do I put them on different buildings, like one on each building, but then I can never clear out as many skulls at once with a clearing out action?
And that's the thing. I think it gives you some
fun choices.
Some choices there.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give this a 7.5. I think that there's some really cool things that happen with the player powers. Really enjoy it. The monuments are very meh to me. I don't even really want to play with them. I think I'd rather just play with the basic buildings. And I don't know if you can do that in this scenario, because it tells you which ones to put out, right?
It tells you which ones to remove and put out, this foundation.
It's probably a balance thing.
Yeah.
But it's so hard for me to want to chase them. But I do really like a lot of the other stuff going on in the game.
Yeah. I'm going to say my score is an 8. And the thing is that the original Dark Tower review, I gave the Dark Tower a 7.5. I did a video where I talked about my changing scores, and Dark Tower's gone up to an 8.5 for me. Mm-hmm. The more that I've played it, the more I just really love everything going on. I think this is a very good expansion, but it kind of feels like a second expansion, compared to what the first one offered. This one feels a little bit like... I think that you might be better suited getting that first one first and then getting this one as a second expansion if you really love the game. Because if you're still kind of new to the game, I think the Wastelands are going to feel like they're beating you up more than they actually are, but it's going to feel like you're getting beat up. It's going to feel like, I really want to make these monuments, but I can't quite do it. And then having 4 more characters is an amazing feeling that I think probably comes from the excitement of that comes from having a little bit more experience with the game. So an 8 out of 10 means I'm very much recommending this. This is going to get a seal of approval from us. I love those characters. I love some of the things that this throws into that puzzle. I wish I liked the monuments more, and I think that this is a very solid second expansion. So if that makes sense with my thoughts here.
Okay, I think that makes sense, Chris.
Okay, well, there you go.
All right, thanks for joining us today. I'm Wendy Yee.
And I'm Chris Yee.
And go ahead and tell us what you think about this monument idea. I'm very curious about that.
Monumental.